the smell of a proper British pub on a Saturday afternoon, the sound of a pint glass hitting the bar, the taste of a beer that's been brewed in this country for generations. We've ranked 20 of Britain's most famous beer brands from worst to best, and some of these rankings will have you spitting your pint out. Let's see if your favourite made the top spot. Carling calls itself Britain's #1 lager, and that's the problem right there. It's popular because it's cheap and everywhere, not because it's any good. Every working men's club and Wetherspoons has it on tap, and blokes drink it because it's cold and wet, not because it tastes of anything. It's the lager equivalent of white sliced bread. Utterly inoffensive, completely forgettable, and gets the job done without bringing any joy whatsoever. Your dad probably drank it in the 80s because it was half the price of proper beer, and you probably drink it now for exactly the same reason. Now, there's nothing wrong with a cheap pint when you're 10 deep on a Friday night. But ranking it means being honest. Carling is fizzy yellow water that exists to get drunk on, not to enjoy. The fact that it's Britain's biggest seller says more about British drinking culture than it does about the quality of the beer. It does what it needs to do, but if you're drinking Carling for the taste, you're lying to yourself. Foster's pretends to be Australian, but it's brewed in Manchester, and Australians wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. It's another one of those lagers that exists purely because it's cheap, easy to drink in volume, and turns up at every barbecue and party where nobody cares what they're drinking. The taste is watery, metallic, and disappears the moment you swallow it, which is probably for the best. Blokes drink it because it's cold and alcoholic, and birds drink it because it doesn't taste too beery, damning with faint praise if ever there was any. The ads used to be funny back in the day, but the beer itself has never been anything special. It's pub garden lager for people who don't actually like beer, and there's a place for that, but it's nowhere near the top of any serious ranking. If you're choosing Foster's over literally anything else on this list, you're either skint or you've got no taste buds left. Tennent's is Scotland's lager, and it's famous for having birds in bikinis on the cans back in the 70s and 80s, which tells you everything about why blokes bought it. The beer itself is perfectly drinkable, but utterly unremarkable. Crisp and clean, but with no real character to speak of. Up in Scotland it's an institution, but down here it's just another cheap lager that does the job without making you think twice about it. You'd drink it at a wedding or a football match, but you wouldn't go out of your way to buy it. The original Tennent's Lager Lovelies cans are worth a fortune now to collectors, which is ironic because the beer inside them was never worth collecting. It's better than Carling and Foster's purely because it doesn't taste actively offensive, but that's setting the bar about as low as it goes. Decent enough for a session, forgettable enough that you won't remember what you drank the next morning. Kronenbourg pretends to be French and sophisticated, but it's just another mass-produced lager that's been adopted by British pubs because it sounds fancier than Carling. It's got a slightly sweet, almost cidery taste that some people like and others find cloying, and it's stronger than your average lager at 5%, which means it gets you where you're going a bit quicker. Blokes order it when they want to feel like they're drinking something a cut above the usual suspects, but really it's just Eurotrash lager with better marketing. It's perfectly fine as session lagers go, better than the bottom three, but not by much. The 1664 Blanc version tastes like someone dissolved a Werther's original in your pint, which is either brilliant or horrifying depending on your mood. Standard Kronenbourg occupies that middle ground of being just good enough that you won't complain if it's on tap, but not good enough that you'd actively seek it out. John Smith's Extra Smooth is what your dad drank in the 90s when bitter went creamy and smooth, and every pub had those weird nitrogen widgets that made it pour like Guinness. It's a Yorkshire bitter that's been neutered for mass appeal, smooth to the point of having almost no character whatsoever. The ads with Peter Kay were funny, but the beer itself is the definition of safe and boring. It won't offend anyone, but it won't excite anyone, either. Old blokes still swear by it because it's what they've always drunk, and changing beer is like changing football teams. You just don't do it. The problem with Extra Smooth is that it's smooth at the expense of everything else. No real bitterness, no real hop character, just a vaguely malty creamy pint that slides down easy and disappears from memory just as quick. It's comfort beer for people who want something that tastes like beer without challenging them in any way. better than the lagers below it purely because it's actual British bitter rather than continental fizz, but that's about the only compliment you can give it. Worthington's used to be a proper Burton beer before the big brewers got hold of it and turned it into another bland keg bitter. It's still got a bit more character than John Smith's, slightly sweeter, slightly fuller, but it's still nowhere near what it used to be when it was cask conditioned and properly looked after. Your granddad probably drank Worthington's when it was the real deal, and what you're drinking now is a pale imitation of that heritage. It's the beer equivalent of a classic British car that's been bought by the Chinese and turned into something unrecognisable. That said, it's perfectly drinkable if you're in a pub with limited options, and it's got just enough body and flavour to remind you that British bitter used to mean something before the accountants took over. You're drinking history when you drink Worthington's, even if that history's been watered down and sanitised. It's mid-table mediocrity, but at least it's trying to be something rather than nothing. Newcastle Brown Ale is a Geordie institution that's been drunk by working men since 1927, and it's got that distinctive sweet, nutty, slightly metallic taste that you either love or hate from the first sip. It's not really a brown ale in the traditional sense, it's more like a strong bitter that's been bottled and sweetened, and it's made for drinking in volume rather than savouring. Blokes used to sink 6 or 7 bottles of Nuki Brown on a Friday night, and still be standing, and it's got that working class credibility that you can't fake. The fact that it's not brewed in Newcastle anymore is a travesty, but the beer itself still carries that heritage. It's nostalgia in a bottle for anyone over 50, and it's still got enough character to stand out from the crowd of bland lagers and smooth bitters. You wouldn't session it all night, too sweet, too heavy. But a couple of bottles with a curry or while watching the match is proper British drinking. It ranks here because it's got personality and history, even if it's not the most refined beer you'll ever taste. Boddington's used to be Manchester's pride, a proper cask bitter with a tight creamy head that looked like it had been poured from heaven. Then the big brewers turned it into another Nitra keg smooth beer, and while it's still drinkable, it's lost most of what made it special. The ads in the 90s with Melanie Sykes made it famous nationwide, but by then it was already a shadow of its former self. If you ever had Boddington's from a cask in a proper Manchester pub in the 70s or 80s, you'll know that what you're drinking now isn't the same beer. It's a tribute act. Still, even neutered Boddington's is better than most of the competition, and that creamy texture and slight bitterness makes it halfway decent for a session. It's got just enough character left to remind you why it was famous in the first place, even if it'll never reach those heights again. It ranks here because of what it was as much as what it is, a proper British beer that got compromised by commerce, but still has enough DNA left to be worth drinking. Stella's reputation in Britain is complicated. It's called wife beater for a reason, and every town centre on a Friday night will have blokes 6 pints deep into Stella looking for trouble. But putting aside the cultural baggage, it's actually a decent premium lager. Crisp, slightly bitter, more full-bodied than the cheap stuff, and strong enough at 4.8% to get you properly refreshed. The problem is that Stella drinkers have given it such a bad name that ordering one feels like announcing you're looking for a fight. Your dad probably switched from bitter to Stella in the 90s when lager took over, and he's been drinking it ever since despite what everyone says. The beer itself is better than its reputation suggests. It's got actual hop character, a proper bitter finish, and enough body to taste like something rather than nothing. It's reassuringly expensive, as the old ad said, and while that's marketing bollocks, there's truth in the fact that it's a cut above Carling and Foster's. It ranks here because when you strip away the baggage, it's a solid premium lager that does what it says on the tin, even if what it says on the tin makes people cross the street to avoid you. Stones is Sheffield's bitter, and it's one of the few proper British bitters that survived relatively intact into the modern era. It's not smooth, it's not creamy, it's just honest, straightforward bitter with a bit of bite to it. Exactly what bitter should be. Blokes in Sheffield have been drinking Stones since Queen Victoria was on the throne, and it's still being drunk in working men's clubs and proper pubs across Yorkshire. It's not fancy, it's not craft, It's just solid, dependable British bitter that tastes like beer rather than marketing. The only reason it's not higher is that it's hard to find outside Yorkshire, and even when you do find it, it's not always in the best condition. But when it's right, Stones is everything a British bitter should be. Malty, slightly hoppy, not too strong, and absolutely made for drinking in pints while talking rubbish with your mates. It ranks here because it represents proper regional brewing heritage that hasn't been completely destroyed by the big boys, and that's worth celebrating. Hobgoblin is Wychwood Brewery's Ruby Ale, and it's one of the first craft beers that broke through to mainstream pubs in the noughties. It's strong at 5.2%, dark, slightly sweet, with toffee notes, and has that distinctive goblin on the label that made it stand out on the bar. It's not a session beer, too strong, too rich. But a couple of pints of Hobgoblin after work hits different to drinking another boring lager. Younger blokes discovered it when they got bored of carling, and older blokes switched to it when they wanted something with a bit more going on. The problem with Hobgoblin is that it's been so successful, it's lost some of its outsider credibility. It's in every Wetherspoons now, and what was once craft beer rebellion has become just another option on the bar. But it's still a proper interesting beer with character and flavour, and it represents that moment in British beer culture when people started realising there was more to life than smooth, bitter and premium lager. It ranks here because it's genuinely good beer that helped change British drinking for the better. Old Speckled Hen is proper British ale with history. It was brewed to commemorate an old car at the MG factory in Abingdon, and it's been a staple of British pubs since the 80s. It's a premium bitter at 5%, deep golden, malty and smooth, but with actual hop character that gives it backbone. Your dad probably discovered it when he got sick of John Smith's and wanted something with a bit more to it, and once he found it, he stuck with it, because that's what British men do. It's the beer you drink when you want to feel like you're drinking properly without getting into craft beer territory. Old Speckled Hen represents that sweet spot between boring mass-market bitter and intimidating craft beer. It's accessible, widely available, consistently good, and actually tastes like something. It's strong enough to give you a proper buzz without knocking you sideways, and it's got enough flavour to make each pint interesting, rather than just fuel. It ranks here because it's been reliably excellent for 40 years. And in an industry full of disappointments and sellouts, that's worth its weight in gold. Marston's pedigree is Burton bitter at its finest, or at least at its most famous. It's been brewed using the Burton Union system since Victorian times, and you can taste that heritage in every sip. Slightly sulphurous, distinctively hoppy, with that characteristic Burton snap that comes from the local water. It's not for everyone. Some people hate that sulphur note. But for blokes who grew up drinking proper bitter, pedigree is the real deal. It's what bitter tasted like before the big brewers smoothed it out and made it boring, and if you can find it on cask in a pub that looks after it properly, it's genuinely world class. The problem is that pedigree in bottles or bad pubs can be disappointing, and the quality varies more than it should. But when it's right, it's absolutely stunning. Complex, characterful, proper grown-up beer for people who drink for taste rather than effect. It ranks here because it represents British brewing heritage at its best, and because blokes who know their beer will always respect pedigree even if they don't always drink it. Fuller's London Pride is probably the most famous British beer in the world, and it's earned that reputation by being consistently excellent for decades. It's not flash, it's not trendy, it's just beautifully balanced amber ale with a biscuity malt backbone, gentle hop bitterness, and that distinctive Fuller's yeast character. Your dad probably drank it in London pubs in the 70s, and you probably drink it now when you want something proper. It's the beer that proves British brewing doesn't need to shout and show off. It just needs to be good, reliable, and distinctively British. London Pride is everywhere now. Every pub, every supermarket, every airport. And familiarity might breed contempt, but it shouldn't. This is world-class beer that happens to be available everywhere, and that's something to celebrate rather than criticise. It's strong enough at 4.7% to be satisfying, flavourful enough to be interesting, but balanced enough to drink all session long. It ranks here because it's the benchmark against which all other British bitters are measured, and very few come close. Shepherd Neame's Bishop's Finger is proper Kentish ale, strong at 5.4%. Rich and fruity, with a distinctive spicy hop character that comes from using Kentish hops that have been grown in the same fields for centuries. It's an old-school strong ale that's made for sipping rather than gulping, complex and interesting rather than easy drinking, and it's got more character in one pint than most beers have in their entire range. Blokes who drink Bishop's Finger know their beer, and they're willing to pay a bit extra for something that's actually worth drinking rather than just getting drunk on. The name comes from a road sign in Kent. Not anything rude, though that's never stopped anyone making the obvious jokes. But the beer itself is serious. This is what British brewing looks like when it's done right, with proper ingredients, proper technique, and proper respect for tradition. It ranks here because it's genuinely excellent beer that hasn't been compromised or watered down, and in modern Britain, that's increasingly rare. Green King's Abbot Ale is Suffolk's strong bitter at its absolute best. 5% alcohol, deep russet colour, rich and malty, with a hefty hop finish that lets you know you're drinking proper beer. It's won more awards than you can count, and it deserves every single one of them because Abbot Ale is what British bitter should taste like. Complex, characterful, satisfying, and uncompromising. Your dad probably switched to Abbot when he decided he was too old for lager and wanted something with substance. And he's been drinking it ever since because why would you change something that's perfect? Abbot represents British brewing excellence without the craft beer pretension. It's not trying to be trendy or innovative. It's just trying to be the best possible version of what British bitter has always been. You can find it everywhere, but that doesn't diminish it, because unlike most beers that go mainstream, Abbot has kept its quality and integrity. It ranks here because it's genuinely world-class beer that happens to be British, affordable, and available. Everything great beer should be. Landlord is Yorkshire's gift to British brewing, a premium pale ale that's won more Champion Beer of Britain awards than anything else. It's perfectly balanced, hoppy but not overpowering, malty but not sweet, strong at 4.3% but dangerously drinkable. Blokes who know beer will travel miles to find pubs that serve Landlord properly, and once you've had it in perfect condition, every other beer seems slightly disappointing. It's what Madonna drinks, apparently, which either adds to or detracts from its credibility, depending on your perspective. But the beer itself needs no celebrity endorsement. It's simply brilliant. Timothy Taylor's is one of the few British breweries that's never sold out, never compromised, never chased volume at the expense of quality. Landlord proves that British brewing can compete with anything in the world when it's done with care and expertise. It's not cheap, it's not everywhere, and when you do find it, the pub needs to look after it properly. But when all those stars align, Landlord is as close to perfection as British beer gets. It ranks here because it represents the absolute pinnacle of traditional British brewing. Black Sheep was founded by a member of the Theaxton family who refused to accept his family brewery being sold to a conglomerate, and that rebellious spirit runs through every pint. Best bitter is proper Yorkshire Ale, 4.4%. Copper-coloured, beautifully balanced between malt sweetness and hop bitterness, with a dry finish that makes you immediately want another sip. It's won awards, it's won respect, and it's won the loyalty of blokes who want proper British beer brewed properly by people who actually care. The brewery still uses Yorkshire Square fermenters, traditional methods that bigger breweries abandoned decades ago because they're expensive and difficult, but they make better beer. Black Sheep represents everything that's good about British brewing. Independence, quality, tradition, an absolute refusal to compromise. The beer tastes like Yorkshire, straightforward, honest, no nonsense, just properly good bitter that does exactly what it's supposed to do. It ranks this high because in a consolidating industry, full of sellouts and compromises, Black Sheep stands for something real, and the beer proves that principles and profit don't have to be enemies. Harvey's Sussex Best is brewed in Lewis, using the same Victorian equipment and methods they've used since 1790, and you can taste that continuity in every sip. It's perfectly balanced, 4% chestnut brown, hoppy and malty in equal measure, with a long dry finish that's distinctively Harvey's. This is what British beer tasted like before the Industrial Revolution homogenised everything. And the fact that Harvey's has survived, thrived, and kept quality paramount while everyone else sold out or closed down makes it genuinely special. Blokes in Sussex have been drinking Harvey's all their lives. Their dads drank it, their granddads drank it, and their great-granddads drank it. That's heritage you can't fake. Harvey's remains independent, family-owned, and utterly committed to brewing proper beer properly. Sussex Best has won every award going, but more importantly, it's the beer that locals drink every single day because it's consistently excellent. You're drinking living history when you drink Harvey's, a direct connection to Victorian Britain through beer that hasn't changed because it doesn't need to. It ranks second because it represents British brewing at its absolute best: traditional, independent, excellent and uncompromising. Fuller's Extra Special Bitter is the greatest British beer ever brewed, and that's not nostalgia talking. It's objective fact confirmed by decades of awards, expert opinions, and the judgment of blokes who've dedicated their lives to drinking. It's strong at 5.9%, deep amber, ridiculously complex with layers of malt, hops, fruit, and that distinctive Fuller's character that's impossible to describe but unmistakable once you've tasted it. ESB invented the entire category of strong bitters, and every other brewery that's tried to copy it has fallen short because Fuller's has been perfecting this beer since 1971, and they've got it down to an exact science. This is beer for grown-ups who drink for pleasure rather than effect, though at 5.9%, you'll certainly feel the effects if you have too many. ESB is what you drink when you want the best, when you want to taste what British brewing can achieve when quality is the only consideration. It's not cheap, it's not everywhere, and it's not easy drinking. It demands your attention and rewards you for giving it. It ranks first because nothing else comes close, and probably nothing else ever will. This is British brewing at its absolute zenith, and if you've never had it, you haven't really experienced what British beer can be. From Carling's mediocrity to Fuller's perfection, British beer is a spectrum of quality, heritage, and taste. If this made you thirsty or angry, hit subscribe and watch the next video on screen where we rank something else that'll get you arguing. Cheers.